The basketball world is healing. The Villanova boys are finally together, the juggernauts of the West and East have finally been slain, and the entire landscape of the league has never looked more open. Out of the East alone, we have two potential Larry O'Brien candidates in the Knicks and Celtics, and a dark horse in Milwaukee, and the West has established itself with four legitimate contenders, whom I'll let you imagine the four I'm talking about. However, in this healing process, we must also address the fact that there are some teams who are on the less zen paths of recalibration. Some teams who are having a doozy of a time committing to a rebuild and the process of finding themselves. It is truly a harrowing spiritual journey when a team decides it's time to throw in the towel of struggling to contend. Hell, even some teams find solace in just making the playoffs. It's never championship or bust with some orgs, but one team in particular is facing an interesting dilemma heading into the 2025 NBA season. One Windy City team has been struck with one of the worst plagues a team can face. Not good enough to contend in the playoffs, and not bad enough to enter the Cooper Flag sweepstakes. One city that's bullheaded enough to hold on to 66% of their failing Big Three and has been preying on the resurgence of their max contract high flyer for quite some time now. A team riddled with question marks, but no true superstar to build around to answer those questions. Of course, we're talking about the Chicago Bulls. For context, the Bulls finished 9th in the East last year, 10th in the East the year prior, 6th in the year prior to that, and 11th in the East in 2020. Let me be clear. The Bulls have never been a bottom two team in the entire league. There have been more piles of dog shit that have put on worse jerseys than they have in the past decade. That is to say, they've struggled to find their consistency post-Jimmy Butler era. And the flashes of improvements from the youth have been very far and in between. Scarce, if you will. Their initial bank on getting LaVine was to be hopeful of a potential rise to an all-NBA level, be a franchise cornerstone to build around and prove he wasn't just a flashy dunker who robbed Aaron Gordon of a Vince Carter/Dominique Wilkins award. Those aren't the dunk contest trophy names, but Adam Sandler, if you're listening, I have a great way to spice up the contest. Give me a call. We can set something up. Your people talk to my people. Anyways, the idea of getting LaVine was in large hopes of rise to superstardom, which he definitely had flashes of coming back-to-back All-Star seasons in 2021 and 2022, respectively. The best version of LaVine was a 27-5-5 scorer with blistering efficiency, shooting nearly 42% from three with 8 attempts a game, and nearly a 60 effective field goal percentage, and some of the absolute nastiest game winners you've ever seen in your entire life. This version of LaVine is something that gave Bulls fans actual hope. It gave me a lot of hope in the idea that LaVine was about to be an all-NBA level player for years to come. Unfortunately, some lower knee soreness, a tweaked ankle, and an arthroscopic knee surgery on his left leg later, and LaVine has struggled to find that same kind of form that he had just a few seasons ago. LaVine's floor-to-ceiling volatility is something that still leaves us yearning for what could have been for this Bulls squad. Yet, I digress. The other side of the injury spectrum is the return of Lonzo Ball. Triple B's he was the man for Chicago once upon a time. In the 35 games Lonzo played with Chicago before injuring his knee, it was some of the most well-rounded basketball he's played in his entire life. 13-5-5 with 43% three-point shooting, launching 8 a game, with some of the best guard defense you've seen out of him yet. It was enough for the NBA community to collectively believe in this Bulls squad. Zoe is still only 26, and I really want to see Chicago work around having him return, because the jury is still out on what he can do once he has some real runway with this roster. More on Lonzo coming soon, but let's just dig into the meat and potatoes of this roster and why exactly I believe this team is destined to have one of the more turbulent but exciting seasons we've seen from a rebuilding team in a long time. But enough with dwelling on the past. Let's start by looking into some of the future aspects and potential loomers this Bulls squad, with one of the most obvious ones, Matas Buzelis. Stamp it right now. Buzelis will be an absolute steal in this draft when you look 3 years down the road. In a redraft that everyone will inevitably do in a couple years, you'll probably see him picked as high as number 2 or 3, and I want to make sure that it's well documented that I am this high on this dude before Ball Don't Stop or Ball Is Life start making reels about him potentially being an all-star in year 3, because this dude is legit. I've talked about the comps and skill ceilings in a previous video, so instead I want to talk about the temperament and attitude. This guy fucks. You can tell as he walks into a gym and he genuinely thinks he can take anyone there in one's 3-dribble max. Matas is a true competitor and wants to absolutely kick your ass. He's the kind of hooper where he hates losing more than he wants to win. The player who might shoot you out of games, but more often than not will be the reason you're even a part of them. I believe that the sophomore season might hit Mattis like a freight train, but we're probably looking at an all-star level by the time he turns 23. I'll hold my judgment on Josh Giddey. He's had some sparks on Team Australia that led me to believe he will indeed be revitalized on this Bulls roster, but I'll shed some more limelight on two other young Bulls who I believe are about to take yet another leap in their progression. The next man on the docket is none other than the Paw himself, P-Dub, aka Kawhi Light, Patrick Williams. I'll admit, just like the Evan Mobley and Franz Wagner's of the world, I expected a lot more from this guy a lot sooner than most people. Advertised as a supremely versatile forward who had an explosive upside as a 3-level scorer, coupled with switchable defense mirroring the OG Anunoby and Kawhi Leonards of the world, I thought this guy was going to be the complete package as soon as his sophomore year started. Needless to say, an injury in year 2 kind of mega derailed his progression, and while he still is only 22 years old, I still feel like I should have seen more from him by now. His career high against the Timberwolves on April 10th in 2022 was a perfect example of his arsenal once it's fully equipped. A mid-range assassin who was lethal on both sides of the ball, shot it efficiently, and showcased why he was given the comparisons to OG and Kawhi. I honestly think he's got time to fully reach that kind of ceiling, but the jury is still out on how he'll look going into year 5, and this whole new look Bulls roster might kind of fuck with his progression. I could gab on and on and on and on and on about Coby White. This guy has emerged as the once destined Bulls savior that he was gonna be. Being buried in the depth chart and playing sub 30 minutes for the majority of his Bulls tenure has finally been broken, and he's been unleashed. A superb blend of herk and jerk, winding and bendy athleticism, and spring and pop from a standstill that gives you a combo guard who's capable of running the break and finishing it himself. A 94 feet of hardwood competitor who's honestly sneakily more gifted as a passer than people give him credit for. It might be a hot take, but by 2026, I predict we see Coby White make an all-star team alongside Buzelis, as long as the Bulls don't sit too deep into the East bottom feeders by then. The last guy I want to slide in here real quick is Ayo Dosunmu. No, it's not Dosunmu or Dosunmu that I've seen some people pronounce, but my goodness, yet another dilemma with how good this guy could fucking be. A springy quick guard who gets up in a hurry. I've seen him go and mount a motherfucker in the open floor, and I dare say, I know you might not like this, he draws some similar characteristics as Emmanuel Quickley on the Raptors, so if that's any telling on what his ceiling could be, then you're sitting pretty. Ayo has shown the qualities to be the perfect sixth man who could definitely see himself in a starting role in a pinch. I doubt his diet expands much more than the occasional go out there and get yours kind of possession, but he's also extremely balanced off the catch. I've seen him do some, dare I say, Nash-esque middle of the lane, keep your dribble alive kind of moves that leads me to believe he's much more comfortable initiating his own offense than we all previously thought. He's extremely acrobatic in the air, and most importantly, he's always one to push the tempo when he's got the man advantage. I think with the distinct lack of real established options on the Chicago roster, they'll look to really expand their depth chart and experiment with some Frankenstein-esque lineups that might leave us scratching our heads in the short term, but I'm always one to let a roster cook. And while the Bulls might not be a Michelin-star bistro, they're at least a kitchen with working fire alarms and only a few rats.